I don't think anybody, especially not South Africans, would dispute the fact that this film has really highlighted things that need to be highlighted, and we're going to get to that. But before we get there, all four of you are students at the University of Cape Town, where transformation is an ongoing discussion, and certainly with the Rhodes Must Fall movement based in the University of Cape Town and the actual statue of Cecil John Rhodes being removed, we know that transformation is high on the agenda of the students, at least, at the University of Cape Town. Won't you guys tell us a little bit more about how that background coming from UCT could potentially have influenced or spurred you on to this work?
Well, I mean, we all started at campus radio, at UCT Radio, and we were all there at the time when campus basically erupted with the Rhodes Must Fall movement and the statue being removed. So we were all pretty much, as journalists, entrenched in it. So we have a pretty good understanding of the whole movement and how it broke out, and then how the transformation debate has moved through the country, at least, you know, and it's definitely positioned us in a place where we understand, you know, what South Africans are dealing with, and it's a universal issue that's being dealt with at multiple universities.
I also think that going to Stellenbosch that day and hearing all these stories, I mean, we had about, I think it was 3.5 hours of raw footage by the end of that day when we had finished filming everyone. And you know, you only see 35 minutes of it in the final documentary. But to hear all those testimonies about how Stellenbosch hasn't really changed, coming from a background where so much is changing all the time, and of course this year has been insane in that regard, seeing how little that has changed and how there's such a stark contrast just effectively down the road, really shocked us and gave us more motivation to really make the film, because for us it was a completely outsider's perspective. When we interviewed those people, some of the most shocking stories you see in the interviews in the film weren't sort of planned to be said. The students had come there sort of wanting to say something different about the language policy, and we started asking them, have you ever felt alienated because of your race at the university? And then these stories started pouring in. It was sort of like it was an afterthought for them. It had become normalized. And we sort of even found that, I mean, that first day when we interviewed them all, like, was emotionally was just devastating for all of us, I think. We left that room. It took us about 6 hours to get through everyone. And we were driving back from Stellenbosch to Cape Town, and we were just, you know, in silence, like, what just happened?
I think as a viewer, that's really what struck me the most. Obviously, the issues of translation and wanting to attend classes in English were very important, and certainly it was striking. But it was those everyday stories of black South Africans in Stellenbosch University feeling as though they don't belong in certain places, or the one gentleman who recounted dancing with a white friend and having a beer poured over him for that one really normal act of friendship. I think that really resonated with so many South Africans.
And what's crazy is that, you know, obviously a film like this doesn't take a short amount of time to make. We spent, I mean, we debate it, but it's sort of between 60 and 100 hours of like editing on this film. So of course, and especially for me as the editor, I sat with this footage alone more than these guys did. And you know, you watch it over and over again when you edit something. And it was sort of a reality check when we started to show it to people just before we released it, that how shocking these stories were, because hearing them over and over again, we sort of became desensitized to them.
You're numbed.
Yeah, we became numb to it, and we sort of watched it over, and we didn't have the emotional response that everyone else has. And I think that's what happens when you live in a place like that, obviously on a much grander scale, where you're surrounded by these incidents all the time, and because you're just immersed in it, it becomes normalized. And we even saw that when we just listened to these stories over and over again, they started to lose their impact. And we didn't even have much confidence in the film when we released it, because we had become so numb to it. We were sort of like, is this any good? Is this shocking at all?
Is this even racism? You know?
Yeah,
Will people
you know,
be shocked by this? Yeah.
And then we showed it to people, and you know, when we watched it with people, they were just, it was silence. They were just gasps, and we kind of clicked again. We were like, oh yeah, I remember we felt like that on the first day.
I think also that the fact that we became numb to it, or maybe even they were numb to it when they were telling their stories, might also just show the fact that they are very genuine. And I think this comes in connection with like why we call the movie Luister, right? Because they knew these stories, they've been telling these stories over and over again to people, but no one is listening. And I think that's why we called it Luister, I mean, so that people would finally listen to these stories.